What's up, everyone? Jacob here with Team Kitchen Fable, and today I have a recording that I'm going to go back over and analyze with a game between me and Jeromy from the LGS team in this last week's Flesh and Blood competitive team league matches. I was on Oldhim and he was on Briar, and I wanted to show this matchup because I made a lot of mistakes, and I want to encourage you guys to go back over your own matchups and watch them and see what kind of mistakes you make. It's a really useful tool. If you record your matches, it's really easy to set up OBS, record your TTS stream, and just go back and watch them. You'll see a lot of things that you wouldn't have seen during the game. You get to fast forward and rewind and see what could have changed if you did things differently. So I kind of wanted to show an example of what I do when I rewatch my own games, try to analyze and see what I could have done differently, what mistakes were made, and how things could have gone differently. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and start the recording. We'll start with the die roll. He wins the die roll. Definitely whoever wins wants to go first, as with pretty much tons of heroes in Classic Constructed these days with how powerful the Arsenal slot is and getting an extra tunic counter over your opponent. So he's just going to start by pitching 2 reds to make a rune chant. This is a pretty good way to conserve resources in his deck. He has 3 copies of Sonata Arconic, so those reds are going to get shuffled back in, and he's going to keep the threat density high, and he's going to start with an Arsenal. So I have a free turn. There's not very much good stuff I can do here. In fact, it might make sense to not even attack myself because I turn on his Scar for his Scars, especially because giving him a Frostbite sometimes doesn't even matter when he has a full grip in this hybrid Briar list where uh, they have tons of blues, they can pay for Frostbites fairly easily. I don't necessarily think there was a way I could have told he was hybrid Briar off of that first hand where he just pitched 2 reds, but it's a little bit more popular nowadays, and if he's Lightning Briar, then I think I'm a little happier with the matchup anyways. It probably makes a lot of sense just to not attack with the hammer here. So I think he's going to go ahead and decide not to block this. He gets a Frostbite, then I Arsenal and pass. So clearly he can do his turn just fine with 1 extra resource tax on there. And yeah, we see him pitch a blue and immediately punished. His Scar for Scar is turned on. So he's got a Rune Chain coming in with 4 go again. I like to use seeds pretty early in the turn just so I can see what I draw in case it needs to be blocked with or I need to do something else based on what I draw. And then I go ahead and block 4 and leave the Seeds Prevention floating and block the Rune Chant with Arcane Barrier. So this is helpful. I know he's definitely going to come with an attack after this and just hitting all the breakpoints here. Got a Red Ball Lightning. That's just a pretty easy 3 block. Very clean. And then there we see a breakpoint of 4. I can just throw the Glacial Footsteps at this and be happy with the seeds blocking the other piece of it. Many turns you're just going to see me take my Tunic, Arsenal, and pass. I highly value the Arsenal in this matchup. I need to have it to be able to use seeds to hit multiple breakpoints, use my pitch efficiently. So he's going to start with an Earthlore Surge, the very powerful card in this deck, and throw out an Entwine Lightning, which is fused. And so this is going to be for 6 with Go again. Every turn I'm just trying to block as much damage as possible. So most of the thinking I'm doing is just how can I use my pitch efficiently? How can I use my cards to block efficiently? That's really what this matchup is about. And so yeah, oh yeah, so Pulse of Iceloft is such a strong hand. We go to the reaction phase and I reacted. I put his card back on top. And I have 1 floating prevention, I believe. Or maybe I didn't. I'm not quite sure. But in this scenario, I think I like blocking with the blue better. It goes back to the same thing on turn 1. I turn on a Scar for Scars. He probably doesn't care about the Frostbite. And that 4 damage could have just been 1 damage if I had pitched the blue to block with 2 Arcane and 1 with Ram's Head. So overall, I think that extra 3 damage leak was completely unnecessary, and I definitely believe he doesn't block this and he just grabs a Frostbite and moves on with his turn. Yeah. So he has the Frostbite. He's probably got plenty of blues, at least 1 or 2 in his hands to fuel his turn. There we see the blue Ball Lightning pitched. Remembers to take his Tunic, always good. Good start. Plunder Run from Arsenal. It's a red one. And it's very ironic. Both of these times where I shouldn't have attacked with Hammer, he had the Scar for a Scar, but that's okay. He could have came at some other point in time as well. But so here hitting breakpoints again, using Seeds, leaving the Seeds prevention, loading potentially. Or I think I'm still thinking of my block here. I have 1 prevention on Seeds. And yeah, there's a lot of deliberation to do here, unfortunately. This is why Oldhim games can go long. Pays to get a lot of practice with this. And it looks like I used my Tunic counter for Rampart and other floating for Staunch, blocking 7 total, including the Seeds. I think that's a pretty efficient block. Whatever he comes in next, I can probably block it and Ice React a card back to hand. I think the best line here is blocking with Sink Below and Earth Reacting, actually, because it's going to prevent 1 off the top of E-Strike, and then we know he's coming in with Rosetta after this, so the 1 extra prevention will float over into the Rosetta, and then I'm left with Polar Blast in hand, where I can block even 3 more. I wouldn't end with an Arsenal, but he's also not ending with an Arsenal. I think a good metric is sometimes it's okay to not have an Arsenal if your opponent doesn't either. But yeah, instead with the way I blocked, I ended up taking a 4 extra chip damage. I think below an Arsenal is okay, but it's not amazing, especially in the Oldhim where you really want to be just using your Arsenal for seeds most of the time. The Hybrid Briar list runs, I think, no attack reactions. I don't think at least the one that I played against on this match was running any attack reactions. Maybe other ones were. But Sync Below is really more just a breakpoint, and I can hit the breakpoint with using seeds anyways, so it would have probably been better to just take advantage of it on the last turn. So he's going to start off with a Sonata, so he's going to be shuffling back those reds on the bottom back into his deck. He pays an extra 1, so he reveals 4. Unfortunately, he only gets 1 hit off of it. He hits the Earthlore Surge, and he gets to choose between Snatch, Ravenous Rabble, and Lightning Surge put in his hand, but we'll see what he chooses. Oh yeah, so he's gonna choose the Snatch, looks like. I'll pitch Pummel just to block the Arcane. Snatch is a great card. He can use it on the end of a chain to draw a card. Arsenal, pretty good to get an Arsenal in his deck, or just save it for another turn where he might have 2 non-attack actions to give the Snatch go again. Oh, it looks like he's actually doing it this turn. So he played the Sonata, he played the Earthlore, that gives his Snatch go again. It's not that threatening because I know there's nothing special you can do against it. I just have to block for 7 and then be prepared for the Rosetta swing after that. So in this scenario, I'm just looking for ways to cover up the Snatch as much as possible. It's 7 damage. There's no way I can let it hit for him to get a free Arsenal, and I have plenty of defensive resources. I think the best block for me here is actually to pitch the Staunch as well to turn Timber. And then I have 2 floating resources that can be used to block the Rosetta, and then I can save the Arsenal, save the Blizzard for next turn. I do use the turn Timber, so I'm blocking 7 here, but I actually end up blizzarding the Snatch. My dice should show 2 resources floating. If I didn't blizzard the Snatch, I could have just blocked 2 of the Rosetta with the 2 resources floating. So that card only prevented 2 damage there, and I could have saved the Blizzard in hand to do a Frostbite Hammer. Where this scenario where he has 4 cards and not an arsenal, the Frostbite actually may have made a difference, and the 2 damage is a little less impactful than a whole 4 that I think in the game I was considering that Blizzard blocking 4, but I had 2 resources floating, so not actually what happened. So again, you just see me pass the turn back, grab the Tunic counter, and we have an Exude turn. And Exude is like hands down probably the best card against Oldhim specifically. I think if you're just looking at raw cards, I would say Tantamount Heroic is the best card in the deck, but Exude specifically for those matches against Guardian where I just run 1 bajillion exactly defense reactions, it's very punishing. So in this specific instance, he just plays the Exude out with no go again and no threat of on hit like a Plunder Run beforehand. So the idea is just that I can block it out and keep some cards in hand, but I think I could afford to overblock a little bit. The reason being the only way he gives this go again is if he uses Snapdragons. And if he uses Snapdragons, he's just going to be presenting more raw damage. Uh, or he's going to play a non-attack, break the chain, and give my Rampart a chance to get a second block in. So I think it would have actually been a lot better to just overblock this by a little bit, because it's a high likelihood of him not doing much on his turn. But instead, he just arsenals and passes, and I have a Command and Conquer, which is a pretty good uh, lineup with his off turn. It's going to force 2 blocks or a card out of his arsenal, which is pretty good. I have 1 floating and Tunic up, so there's a marginal chance that I have Blue Pummel here, but this arsenal's been sitting here for a while. I've had multiple chances to use Seeds, and if that was a Blue Pummel, I probably would have used Seeds because it's not the best thing. My plan in this matchup is defend as much as possible, and I'd rather just cycle through my deck to find more defense reactions and find more gas, uh, more ice and earth cards rather. So I think he's reasonable in assuming that that's not a blue pummel, even though I am somewhat representing it with the floating pitch and the tunic. So after some deliberation, he decides he doesn't think it's a blue pummel, or he doesn't care if it is, and he blocks 6. He does value his arsenal there, and we'll see what it is. He's going to start with Sonata, and it is a whiff. So he is 1-1 on his Sonata hits this game. And we'll see what he does after this. Yes, so he has Lightning Surge, which is a pretty good card to play from Arsenal. Um, but interestingly, if he had just taken the Command and Conquer there, he had blocked with Scar for Scar, and the Scar for Scar would have had Go Again as well. So maybe it would have been even. He could have saved his equipment and just taken a little bit of damage and had a Scar for Scar turned on with Go Again. Maybe that would have been better, but I'm not quite sure. But from my side of things, I don't have to pay for any Arcane on Sonata. I'm just considering how to block 4 of the many different ways I can block 4 with the Oldhim deck. So what I do is block 3 and pay for 1 to block with Rampart. It may have been better to block with Seeds and Righteous Cleansing because he has the Tunic counter, so we know he's going to Rosetta after that. And then I'll have the Seeds floating. I can block some extra cards and maybe see what's up next in the deck. But either way, I think I blocked all the damage this turn, so that's okay. I end with the card still in Arsenal, and it's not the worst scenario to be in. I'm just doing a quick check of what threats he has. Any plunders and snatches in the deck still. Those enable pretty big turns. But speaking of big turns, he has his first Channel Mount Heroic turn, and it just has a Coax of Commotion. This is pretty good for me. I have the chance to Ice React it and block it out fully, and I think that's what's going to happen. I believe I have a Sink Below in Arsenal, and there's some upside of using the Sink Below to look for an ice card to to potentially Ice React and Ice Hammer on my next turn. And I think that is what I do because it evenly blocks the 7. The downside is actually what happens here, which is drawing a red. But the actual only real downside is that prevents me from just doing a normal hammer for 4. And a normal hammer for 4 with no ice effect turned on is really not that great in this matchup. Uh, I think he did hit his third scar, or I think he blocked with his third scar, so we don't have to worry about that anymore. But just 4 raw damage isn't that threatening, so I'm okay with that as a downside if the upside is that I could have gotten a second ice card to actually use the ice effect on the hammer. And then I did the Ice React to get a card back on top of the deck. Uh, that's like super useful when he has Channel Mount Heroic to hopefully try to nerf his next turn. And I also overpitched with the Red Glacial Footsteps because I didn't want it in my hand. I wasn't going to be able to do anything with it on my turn anyways, and I could just dig a little deeper for my cards. So he's going into a Channel Mount Heroic turn with 4 cards in hand. I prevented him from having an arsenal. And he can still do some damage, but let's see what he does. So he starts by making a rune chant with an earth card. This is a really good way to filter your pitch to try to get extra earth cards down. I don't think he's actually going to be able to get extra earth cards though. And I'm just going to be able to cover it up with the staunch response red. Slight mistake here that didn't have go again. So yeah, we're just mentioning that in the match. And his turn's going to end there. He did not save an extra earth card. That's good for me. And it'll go to my turn. I'm going to do the same thing where I just overpitch that Oakenold. Obviously, playing it doesn't make sense because there's no effect attached and raw damage isn't the biggest deal. So instead, I'm just going to pitch it to use the hammer with ice. And oh, another thing, last turn he had 2 cards left in hand, so ice reacting would not have made sense because he would have just drawn back up anyways and it wouldn't have stopped him from arsenaling a card. So he probably takes the damage here again. He has an arsenal, so the frostbite token isn't as big of a deal. He has extra cards. We will see what he does. I'm just checking the reactions that are left in my deck. Looks like he blocked with 2 blues. Interesting choice because the blues are specifically what lets him pay for the frostbite, but it looks like he had a pretty low impact turn anyway, so he just wanted to save some life there. I think that choice makes sense. He just comes in with a rune chant and a ball lightning. It looks like a yellow one. And it's going to be pretty easy for me to block up most of this damage. It's just a matter of how. I start by using the tuning counter for the rune chant, and then figuring out how I want to block this. He can Rosetta me after this, but it's just going to be for 2 physical. So what I can do is just block with Terra Sunder and then pitch my Earth React. It keeps the card in the deck and it still blocks the 2 from Rosetta. There's not that much chance that I get fatigued, but I think it's useful specifically with the Earth cards because I run less of them than the Ice cards to keep them in the deck. And this turn's not amazing. It's just a raw hammer, but if I have the opportunity, I might as well, especially since his first scars are gone. But I'm not going to be seeking to do this over other things. I could have pitched Turn Timber to dig 1 deeper for an ice card. It looks like I would have drawn an Autumn's Touch, not an ice card, but that probably would have been better. And the worst case scenario, I don't draw an ice card and I still have an arsenal. And this is his first, well, second Exude turn, but it's his first pumped one with Plunder runs in front of it. This is pretty annoying to play against as Guardian. This is one of the harder cards to play against. I think the answer here was pretty clear. I needed to play around 1 pump. And in the game, I miscounted by 1. and blocked 8 instead of 9. So the Exude is coming in for 7. You can pay 3 to pump it by 2, goes to 9. If its power is higher than any power that's blocking it, then I cannot use instants or reactions. And also, he gets to draw 2 cards if it hits off of this plunder run. So it's a very high priority to block this out entirely. And I end up using Seeds, Rampart, and then 2/3 blocks, which blocks 8, and it's over by 1. And I needed to be blocking 9 here. If he has 2 cards in hand and a tuning counter up, it's very likely that he can pay for the pump at least once. So playing around the first pump definitely should have happened. Playing around 2 pumps is probably not as big of a deal because that would require him to use both cards. It would replenish both of the cards if he did it, uh, but it also exposes me to some other things where if I play around 2 pumps and then he just has a go again attack in hand, he doesn't let the Exude hit, but he does another attack, then I have less cards to block that one with. So I ended up taking a lot of damage because I did not play around to the pump. I took 1 damage off this. He draws 2 cards, and also Exude turns off my Ice React because it has higher power than the Glacial Footsteps, which has an 8 power. So this mistake ended up making me leak quite a bit of damage, and we'll see how much exactly he does. I think he follows this up with an E-Strike. Yep, so he chooses E-Strike with Go again, I believe, and he will Rosetta me after this for 2 and 2. He does not have to worry about the Ice React stopping his Rosetta resource going to the top of his deck because Exude is turning it off. So I just block for 3, take 2 from the E-Strike, then I'm going to end up taking 3 from Rosetta because I have 1 floating resource, and then arsenaling my card. So he's considering whether to break the chain to use Grasp of the Arcanite and make a rune chant. Breaking the chain would allow me to put 1 more block on Rampart, but it would deal 1 more damage with rune chant. So actually most of the time it evens itself out when you do that. It doesn't make that much of a difference, but he decides not to break the chain. He just throws a Rosetta and I take 3 damage. And then on my turn I Arsenal and pass. Maybe since he didn't have an Arsenal, there could be some argument to blocking extra with that ice card, just to pitch for the arcane. But I only would have blocked 2 because I already had 1 floating resource. I only would have blocked 1 actually, so I think it's better to arsenal there. So he starts with his turn with a Bramble Spark. That's a very powerful card. It's going to give his next thing 1 arcane damage because it was not fused, I believe. But the Entwine Lightning was also not fused, if I remember correctly. So I have 2 arcane coming at me with the Rune Chant and the Bramble Spark. I start by using Seeds to see what I draw, and then I prevent 1 with Seeds, 1 with Arcane Barrier, and then I pay for Rampart and block 4 damage there. I have a pretty good turn. I get to Command and Conquer his card away. It may have made sense to just Ice React and guarantee that he doesn't get that Arsenal card. But in this instance, I am making him choose to take damage and lose it or block with 2 cards from hand. And the upside is that that card gets destroyed instead of just going back to the top of his deck. So Command and Conquer is probably better here. This also represents Pummel because I had the card in hand, but it was not a Pummel. Then I just Arsenal and pass. He loses a Bramble Spark from Arsenal, which is not the highest priority. It's better if he had like a Plunder run in there or maybe even a Channel Mount Heroic, it would have been a better Arsenal hit, but he's okay with losing the Bramble Spark based on the cards in his hand. So he hits on his 3rd Sonata Arconix. He has a choice between Enlightened Strike and Ravenous Rabble. He chooses Enlightened Strike. Maybe he plans to use the draw card or +2 power effect on that instead of go again. since Ravenous Rabble does have built-in go again and is cheaper because you don't have to bottom a card. Oh, maybe he did it because he had a Ravenous Rabble in hand. So he had the Ravenous, he revealed a blue off the top, so this is just going to be for 2 with go again. It doesn't feel good when that happens in this deck, but it does feel good when you have Channel Mount Heroic out and you have a free go again attack. And the upside of most of your other cards being reds and yellows means that this card is generally hitting for a lot. So I block my 2 with Rampart and my Crown. Comes in with a red Ball Lightning. That's another easy 3 block there, not much thinking to do on that specific card. And then it looks like he actually pitches the Enlightened Strike, hit me for 2 and 2 with Rosetta. I have 1 floating to block 1 of the Arcane. I have an Ice card in hand to Ice React him. So I take 1 Arcane, I block 1 with Arcane Barrier, and then I sink below. I think I just keep the Turn Timber in hand. And then I Ice React him, prevent him from having an arsenal. Go to my turn, take my Tuning Cup and Arsenal and pass. Checking his threats, he still has 2 Heroics, quite a few Ball Lightnings, I think a couple Plunder Runs, but I think he is out of Snatches. So he plays Force of Nature Fused, and then he gets to cast the Channel Mount Heroic. This is a pretty good start to a turn, but he only has 1 card left in hand to take advantage, and he's going to hope to draw some attacks to use with Channel Mount Heroic on next turn. And it's just going to be a Ball Lightning for 5 total. He does draw if it hits because of Force of Nature's effect, but he has no way of bumping it, and all I have to do is block 5 and then block his Rosetta Thorn for 2 and 2 after this. So I just overblock it, I give it 6, and then I choose to take 2 and 2 in order to cast my Channel Lake Frigid. It could be a good way to stop some of his attacks on his Channel Mount Heroic turn, but if he draws enough blues, then it could be inconsequential. I think it's worth it though. The upside is quite a bit of damage stopped. The downside is that I took an extra 4 damage from that Rosetta turn, or Rosetta Thorn last turn. It would also be nice to draw 2 ice cards or draw 1 and seeds into a second ice card in order to keep Channel Lake Frigid around for a second turn. I don't think that happens though, but he's got 4 cards, got Channel Mount Heroic out, and we'll see what he can do. So he pitches to make a Rune Chant. He pitches a second Earth card, which is very nice for him, and he plays Command and Conquer. I read Turn Timber as soon as it popped up. This is a 1 Arcane and 9 damage Command and Conquer. So I think I have the Turn Timber and Arsenal. I probably am going to go ahead and seeds that just to see if I can draw another blocker. I mean, can't use the Turn Timber against Command and Conquer, but here is a significant mistake I made in this game. So I blocked the Arcane. In this game, I had thought that I couldn't use Oldhim's Defense React against Command and Conquer because the TTS card had the first edition Command and Conquer, and that doesn't specify only defense reaction cards are stopped. And they've since eroded that, and the official text is just defense reaction cards. So I technically can use Oldhim's defense reaction here, and it would have been very good to do that. It would have prevented that card from going to Arsenal and would have stopped a lot of damage from another Channel Mount Heroic turn. So this is an unfortunately large mistake here, not knowing that interaction. But it's a mistake that I will only make once now that I know it, and I will definitely be pulse reacting in this situation in the future for sure. So instead I just block lots of damage. I think, yeah, so I choose to take a couple points of damage. I cannot keep my Channel Lake Frigid around. One more option here was to actually got So Tomorrow in hand as well. Because if I did that, I could have pitched both ice cards, 1 to play the So Tomorrow, put something random on the bottom of the deck, and then 2 to Ice Hammer. And that would have kept the Channel Lake Frigid around a second turn and threatened a Frostbite, which may have actually been worth the extra 2 damage that So Tomorrow blocked, as well as not having an arsenal. But not having an arsenal hurts, and taking that extra damage hurts. So pretty much the best thing I could have done is just use the Pulsive Ice and Loft as the defense reaction, and the other stuff is just potential other lines if I didn't have that option. But instead I'm hitting him with the Ice Hammer. He probably can pay for it. He has 4 cards in an arsenal. Uh, let's see. So yeah, he just takes the Frostbite. He's going to pitch a blue, start with a yellow Ball Lightning, and obviously I need to block this. I think I need to start with Seeds though, just to see what I draw. Or I see, I just use the Tunic counter to Rampart and then Sink below. That Ball Lightning's coming in for 5. He has another Ball Lightning. I believe this is also a yellow, and I drew into Staunch Response, so that gets blocked for 5 as well. And then I pitch an Ice card to Ice React him. Maybe that gets rid of another attack. Unfortunately, he gets an arsenaled Command and Conquer, and that's going to be huge. I had enough resources floating to Seeds away my own arsenal, but 9 damage attack on the end of his chain is still huge, taking advantage of Channel Mount Heroic. I block as much of it as I can, but I still take quite a bit of damage. And I'm down to 14, and he still has another Channel Mount Heroic left in the deck. So, not in the best position so far. He's going to start by making a Rune Chant, and then he's going to hit me with the Ball Lightning red. I blocked prematurely because I forgot about paying for the Rune Chant, so I go back and pay the Rune Chant and then declare my block. I can pretty easily block this with 3 in my Rampart and doesn't have Go again. Fairly happy about that. And then I get to Arsenal Blizzard, so ideally I keep this Blizzard around until his next Channel Mount Heroic, and that can potentially stop quite a bit of damage on that turn, just preventing an entire extra attack, especially if he's strapped for resources somehow. But it's just a good tool to save in case a good opportunity comes up to use it. So he actually gets to play Tome of Harvests, put an Arsenal to the bottom, pitch a blue, play that card, and draw 3 cards. He gets to just dig further for his Channel Mount Heroic. That's a great card for his deck, especially when you just hinge on finding your Channel Mount Heroics. I'm checking the deck count here. He's down to 16 cards. So what I'm thinking is if I can live through the last Channel Mount Heroic, I haven't seen him running any Evergreens or So Tomorrows or anything like that. That's going to make him recur threats. It's just about living through this final Channel Mount Heroic. So with the cards he draws off of Tome of Harvest, he starts by pitching to make a Rune Chant, and then he plays Ravenous Rabble. Hit quite a few blues off of his Ravenous Rabbles this game. But like I said earlier, the downside is definitely worth the upside of it just being a free go again, and sometimes not hitting a blue and sometimes hitting a red or a yellow. So I start with Seeds just to see what I draw. I have to pay for the Rune Chant as well. Drawing into a 3 block is good, even though it's Old. So I pay for the Arcane, and then I pay for 1 with Rampart. I have none floating, so the Rampart and the Crown of Seeds are going to soak up the 2 damage from Ravenous Rabble. One thing is that I probably could have gotten away with not using Seeds this turn, blocking some other way. The problem with Seeds is that I just put Blizzard on the bottom of my deck, and like I was saying earlier, Blizzard is a really good tool to keep around. So I should not have aggressively Seeds there, and I should have tried to keep Blizzard around a little longer so that I could take advantage of its effect, because it's very strong in a lot of scenarios. Nevertheless, he plays a Sting of Sorcery, closes the chain. It lets me block up, but this is a really nice setup turn because Embodiment of Lightning does not break when you Rosetta Thorn. So even though I'm going to be able to pay for 2 Arcane Barrier and 1 on Rampart is going to block for 2 because the chain closed, he gets a go again on his first attack next turn. And that's going to be very huge in his hopes of finishing me out off of 14 life. He has 2 cards left in his hand, so Ice React is pretty irrelevant. He has an arsenal no matter what, and a go again, so he's in a really good spot at this point in the game. So I'm going to overpitch. I want to keep just turning through my deck, send out a hammer with the ice effects turned on. Most of the time, the frostbites are just mild annoyances, but in this case where it was free, I didn't take any damage to do it. I might as well do it. So he chooses to take the frostbite. He has a tunic counter up, and the way that interaction works is you have to pitch to play the tunic's ability, but you get the resource back, so it's kind of like using the tunic counter to pay off the frostbite. And that's what he's going to do here. He pitches a blue to pay 1 for the tunic ability, and then the tunic ability basically refunds it. So he has 3 floating currently, and he plays Chanamont Heroic. So the writing is on the wall, especially with this Exude turn. And I want to note a huge mistake here. So you see I have red Turn Timber, red Staunch Response, and a blue Staunch Response in hand. This was actually pitched earlier in the game, and I don't think I was paying attention when I did it. If I was paying attention, I shouldn't have done it. But this is just a huge thing to look out for in these games. Do not pitch all of these defense reactions next to each other when they still have Exude Confidence left in the deck, because you're just going to get blown out. And I definitely had an opportunity earlier in the game to use one of these defense reactions or keep it around a little bit longer. But what happened was I pitched it and then I put another one in Arsenal, and then I did Crown of Seeds and they ended up right next to each other like this. So this is a very bad scenario for me, and there's very minimal ways I can block. All I can hope for is to pitch to Seeds, hopefully draw another bigger block, because the Staunch and the Turn Timber are dead. And so he's coming in for 7. I'm blocking for, I believe I'm actually blocking for 7 here because I had Seeds floating. I should not have taken that 1 damage, but that is okay. And then he hits me with a Autumn's Touch, which is pumped, and I go down to 4. All I can do on my turn is Arsenal and pass. At least he doesn't have any Exudes left. Yeah, so I actually checked his graveyard for Exudes after this and proved to myself there was 3 left because that card is a menace and it gives me nightmares. So at least it's safe to finally Arsenal the Staunch Response, but there's pretty much no way I can live if he has any number of attacks. The frosting on top of the cake is he plays Ravenous Rabble and reveals Gorganian Tome, so this is going to be for 8 damage with Go Again with Chanamont Heroic out. I can block as much as possible, but I'm most likely dying here. I did make a mistake in the way I blocked this. It wouldn't have made a difference, but I paid for Ramset and then Staunch, and alternatively, I had a Tunic counter floating, so I could have used my Tunic and a blue to actually block with Staunch and Turn Timber this game, or rather this turn, and not blocked with that Rampart, and I still would have had Channel Lake Frigid to block with a 3, and an Ice card to put a card back on top. So actually, if I had a little bit higher life buffer, the alternative would have been that I lived with a couple points of life. Yeah, so at this point in the game, there was many ways I was going to lose, so the mistake didn't make that much of a difference of not keeping an extra card and blocking with the blue and Tunic for the Staunch and Turn Timber. But yeah, he just shows me he had another 0 cost attack in hand, and he goes over the top. So I hope this was useful. Watching me make all these mistakes. It definitely was useful for me. I will not make a lot of these mistakes in the future. It's also just useful to see how things could have been different. Some of them may not have been mistakes. Some of them may have been correct in some scenarios and incorrect in others. And with a game with hidden information, you can't always know what's correct. So don't beat yourself up about mistakes. And they're definitely learning opportunities. Some of them are just strictly wrong. I think pitching the Pulse of Isenloft on that Command and Conquer turn would have just been better if I knew that was possible. Will definitely happen in the future. But some of them are rough. One of the hugest things in this specific matchup is when you have one blue ice card in hand and they have one card in hand and you have no cards in arsenal. There's many, many options. You can either, a lot of times they're coming in with Rosetta. You can pitch the blue to block 3 damage on Rosetta. You can pitch the blue to put the card back on top from their hand. You can pitch the blue to do Winter's Well with Ice Effect on, or you can just arsenal it to make sure you're seed. And that many options off of just one card in one scenario that actually happens fairly often make this matchup quite difficult. And all I can say is get as many reps as possible so that you'd know which one of those options to choose is correct in which scenario. And a lot of the times, multiple ones could be correct, and uh, you just have to choose based on gut feeling. So yeah, I would just encourage you guys to start recording your own matches on TTS and watching them back. If anything, it's fun. It's another way to watch more Flesh and Blood content, even if it's just yourself, and you can see what you did and you can improve a lot faster. So thanks everyone for watching. If you appreciated this, leave a like and a comment, and even hit the subscribe if you're feeling extra nice today. Thanks everyone.